Then cut to in the 80s, I got this fantastic role of this character in a movie called Pow Wow Highway that George Harrison produced.
These youngsters from Liverpool, England.
The significance is that the Beatles have held this title for 8 years.
My model of business is the Beatles. You know, they were four very talented guys.
Hello, I'm Jack, and you're listening to the Here, There, and Everywhere podcast, an interview show about the Beatles' influence in the past, present, and future across the universe and across generations. I'd like to welcome today's guest onto the podcast. She's a phenomenal actress who has starred in iconic movies such as Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Nightmare on Elm Street, Better Off Dead, and she also starred in George Harrison's 1989 movie Pow Wow Highway, which was produced by Handmade Films. Here with us today discussing how the Beatles influenced her life, Amanda Wyss. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me, and I'm well. I'm doing well. Thank you.
So, I hear you're a big Beatles fan.
Yes.
So let's start from the beginning because I would love to hear how you got into the Beatles. Can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up?
Yes. I grew up in Manhattan Beach, California, just south of LAX airport. It's a little beach town. Well, it's not so little anymore, but when I grew up there, it was like a Beach Boys song. People that lived there that just loved the beach life, surfing and things like that. So, I lived near the beach, spent a lot of time there playing volleyball and in the ocean. It was very outdoorsy. It was really a magical place to grow up, actually. I don't know that many of those places exist anymore.
Well, that sounds like a really nice setting to grow up in, like right by the beach.
Yeah.
When did you first become interested in music and movies?
Well, it's interesting. I have a sister who's quite a bit older than I am. So even as a little kid, I was exposed to her and her friends, and everybody sort of hung out at my house, or my parents' house. And so I was always exposed to whatever they were listening to. There was a couple that lived across the street from us, and they were sort of hippies, and they would have these things called pick and grins on Sundays, and everybody would sit out in their front yard, and they'd make a big vat of sangria, and all their friends would come over with banjos and guitars and xylophones, and they would just play all this folk music. And so that, like, from the time I was very little, we would all just go sit on the curb and listen to all these, they
Classics.
seemed amazing and brilliant to me at the time. I hope they were. Then the other thing is, at the time, now there's like a bike path and all this separation, but there used to just be this walkway called the Strand. And so on the weekends when everyone was at the beach, everybody that lived there was out on their porches, and all of us were on our bikes or roller skates going back and forth the length of Manhattan Beach, really. And there was just tons of music coming out of everywhere. People had their little I'm dating myself, but their transistor radios, and and so a lot of the radio, it wasn't like it is now. Pretty much everybody was tuned to the same radio station or had an album on. And so I just remember my whole childhood filled with music. I don't know if that even led to wanting to be an actor. I had auditioned for a play when I was 11, and I got it at this theater in LA. Got this play called The Innocents, and that's when I got hooked as far as acting went, and decided to pursue that.
So what was the very first time that you ever heard the Beatles?
This is interesting. I have a distinct memory of seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. I don't know that that's possible. And it could very well be that I've seen that clip so many times, I have turned it into something that I witnessed as a small child. But that is my first memory of it. But I don't know if it's true, because they were on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, and I would have only been 4. So I don't know. Hello, yes, that's my age. And then, I just really remember that. But my sister is 10 years older, and what I remember is her and her friends freaking out about the Beatles. And so every time throughout the year she'd get a new Beatles album, we had this mantle place next to the stereo system. There was always a Beatles album sitting, leaning on the mantle over our fireplace. And I totally remember like seeing like Rubber Soul was up there, Meet the Beatles was up there, the White Album was up there, depending on what was spinning. Or I remember you'd sit on the couch and you'd look up and there they were.
And what were your thoughts when you heard them? Were you instantly hooked by them?
Well, I mean, I was so young, and the first ones I heard were the upbeat, I want to hold your hand and help, or those are the ones I remember anyway. And like all my loving, but I really remember I want to hold your hand. And then, oh, twist and shout. And I just remember like like dancing around to those. And so those are my earliest memories. Are those the real upbeat ones that I'm saying in my mind they were their earlier songs, which I could be totally wrong about that. But I just remember how much I loved those. And then then at some point I heard I've Just Seen a Face. And I just went, well, that is my favorite song. And so that was my favorite song a lot when I was really young. I don't know why, that song just grabbed me, and it seemed happy or something.
Yeah, that's a great song too. No, I feel like that one should be more popular, because that's one of Paul's great hooks. Throughout
Yeah.
the whole song, it just pulls you in, just like you said. I
Yeah.
completely agree with that.
Yeah. And I whenever I do hear it, I sing at the top of my lungs with it because it
Right.
makes me.
So, did the Beatles influence your life in any way aside from just music taste?
Yes, they did. And this is interesting to me, probably not to anybody else. But they were just so, first of all, I was lived at the beach in a bit of a hippie culture, to many degrees. And I remember in the 6th grade, I got John Lennon wireframe glasses, and that became my vibe. And like and the funny thing was I was totally like Paul McCartney was my favorite,
Right.
but I ended up getting this like white sort of piratey shirt and then this suede mini skirt. And it was my John Lennon outfit in my brain. And I wore that to school 3 days a week. And then my mom would say, you have to wear something else. So, and I also, when I got to be about, when I was a little bit older, in my teens, their search for spirituality really influenced me. It started me on a path of yoga and meditation and reading all the great spiritual teachers and going to see the spiritual teachers, and that's directly from their stories of doing that.
Yeah, I used to go through that phase in like the 6th grade. I think that's when. Yeah, that's probably about the time when I grew my hair out because of the Beatles.
Yeah.
So that must be the age.
I think so. Yeah, you were like, we're trying to find, I think, it's that age where you're not a tiny little kid anymore, but you're not really a teenager yet, and you're trying to find yourself. And oh my gosh, and I took so much grief for my little outfit, but I felt beautiful, and I loved my little wire glasses. So, but I always thought that was funny because I was really, like, oh, I had just a massive crush on Paul McCartney, but his style didn't influence me. John Lennon's style influenced me.
How did you get started in acting?
Well, my older sister was studying at UCLA and had auditioned for a play at this theater in Los Angeles. And I went with her, and they had said, oh, we're doing this. Does your little sister, is she an actress? And we were like, no. But anyway, they were doing the Innocents, and they asked me to read for it, and I got it. And then the year after that, I did a play called The Bad Seed, and an agent came. So I ended up getting a commercial agent and a theatrical agent, but I started doing commercials. And so it just sort of happened that way. And then, I took drama in high school, and then I studied drama. I studied theater after high school. So, and knock on wood, I've had some slow times, but I feel really fortunate that I've had a career that has spanned 40 some odd years, and I feel really fortunate that I've been able to make that happen.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, you're an icon in the movie industry.
Oh man, I can't believe you just said that. That's so sweet. I don't feel that, but that you said that, it's making me like feel emotional. Thank you. That's really sweet. You're very
Yeah,
generous.
of course. I
Yeah.
mean, you are. And, I have a question for you regarding one of the iconic movies you've been in. Since your performance in Nightmare on Elm Street was so good, in hindsight, do you think you should have played the lead?
Well, Heather is one of my best friends in real life, so she, I think that she brought something that was just so calm and centered. Like, she has this really quiet power. I would have loved to have been in the movie more or been brought back in the other movies, but I think I was suited well for Tina, and I think I was able to do the job, which was get everybody hooked,
Right.
in the first 20 minutes.
Now, how did you land the role in Fast Times at Ridgemont High?
It was just an audition. I was sent the script and I went in to audition, and then Amy Heckerling had me do an improv with Judge Reinhold, and we sort of improv the breakup scene sitting on the edge of her desk. And it was so much fun because it felt awkward like high school, and we just sat there, and then she just said, "Do you want this part?" I was like, "Yes." So that was it. And then it was just so much fun, and a lot of us are still friends, and the same with Nightmare on Elm Street and Better Off Dead. Something about those three movies, a lot of us stayed, we're still in each other's lives, and it's kind of special. Like my college friends or something.
And out of all of the projects that you were involved in, do you have an absolute favorite?
Well, it's hard because there's a couple that stand out as favorites, but some are for different reasons. Like Silverado was the most magical film shoot I've ever been on. It was just so big and opulent, and everybody was so nice, and it was just really welcoming and fun and magical. It was just this magical experience in beautiful Santa Fe, New Mexico for 4 months. I did a little tiny movie a couple years ago called The Id. So that is a favorite just because it was magical to go down the rabbit hole of such a fun, dark character. Like, it's a real creepy, like, psychological horror movie.
Hmm.
And then for sheer laughing myself to almost death was Better Off Dead. All we did is laugh because Curtis Armstrong and John Cusack and Aaron Dozier, the three guys, they're just stand-up comedians. They are the funniest, most talented, hilarious people on the planet. And we literally would get up, laugh all day at work, have the best time. That we were at a resort, and we'd go to this place called the Tram Bar at night, and they had like a jukebox kind of thing, and we'd play music and goof around for a couple hours, go to bed, get up, and just do it over again the next day. And it was just, we were all so young, and God, it was fun. It was just, I don't know that I've ever laughed that much on a shoot, like to where
That
like
sounds like a
literally,
blast.
yeah, it was really, really fun.
So, speaking of favorites, who's your favorite Beatle?
Well, it's interesting because obviously I already said I had a crush on Paul McCartney. I just thought he was so cute, and I loved like when he played his guitar and sang, and he would just always look so like nice. And then when he married Linda, I just thought they were the most romantic, dashing couple ever. But then, cut to in the 80s, I got this fantastic role of this character named Rabbit that's based on a true character in a movie called Pow Wow Highway that George Harrison produced. It was it was his last film he produced for with Handmade Films.
Right.
And for some reason it's never mentioned when they mention his movies, and it won a bunch of awards. It's a beautiful story about Native Americans I play this crazy Texan. It's all based on a true story. It's with Graham Greene, Gary Farmer, Wes Studi, me, A. Martinez, Janelle Romero. It's just fantastic. And I know it's not up there the same with Monty Python and With Nail and I and all those, but we were the last production. And so I kind of, switched my allegiance to George because he picked me to be in this movie that was like, it's one of the most honorable films I've ever been in that tells an important story beautifully. And it was a really fun character to play. And
Wow.
yeah.
And did you get to meet George at that point?
He was at the premiere very briefly because everyone was like clamoring I mean, you don't like, you walk into the premiere and it's just like, you can feel like all the energy is just focused in one direction and it was at him. So, but he was very, very, very lovely. And it was like, loved my work in the movie and with lovely, but it was ever so brief, which was fine because I'm pretty sure I felt like I blacked out talking to him. Like I couldn't even like really calm down enough to be a human in front of him. So
Right.
yeah.
I would be the exact same. I mean, he picked you. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a testament of how great you are at acting. So,
Oh,
um,
I wish you're so kind. I wish it was. I mean, I've also done some really crappy work and some bad movies too, but I try to do good work and and I do love what I do. I love helping to tell a story and I love providing entertainment and maybe helping somebody feel something that they were afraid to feel or reveal something to them they didn't know about themselves
right.
or add quality to somebody's life, hopefully.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the exact same thing the Beatles music does as well to some people,
Yes, it does. And you know what? It's so funny because, and I know it's a carryover from my childhood. Like on Sundays, what we do is put on the music, and more often than not, it's the Beatles. And we like, like we're making brunch or we're hanging around the house or whatever. And they're the backdrop of so many big moments in my life, whether it's I've never had a birthday where everybody in my family doesn't play me the Beatles birthday song,
Right.
and just I don't know, I just remember like my older sister and her friends, and, they were protesting things and everybody would be blasting Revolution. And I just remember all these, I don't know, just, gosh, I don't know, like, oh, we can work it out. Such a great song. I just love
Yeah.
that song so
Yeah.
much. Sorry, that just popped into my head. I'm like, I'm just now like, but I just remember like so many school dances and they're the backdrop of so many magical and sad and just big moments in my life because I feel like they were always on and they still are. So
Do you have a favorite memory associated with the Beatles?
I, I, it's so funny because I know there's so many things. But I think like my favorite memory is being in George Harrison's movie, which I know that isn't about the music, but I just feel like, I don't know, like that's so that and then there's another thing when I was young. I my brother Steve passed away, and I remember hearing "Carry That Weight," and that was and still is like when I hear that, I have it connected to that, but it made it more beautiful.
Hmm.
So I don't know that that's like a favorite thing, but that's how deep or for me, I just think that's so. And Hey Jude and Yesterday, like I have all those sort of associated with that, but not in a bad way, in a comforting way that I felt like somebody had helped me express grief at a young age that I wasn't able to do, but in a beautiful way, and also gives giving it wings to fly because it's also something that can make you happy at the same time, the music. Does that make sense? Am I
Oh,
rambling?
absolutely. I think that for many people in the world, and probably a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, the Beatles have been there in a time have been there at a time in their life where no one else was able to be there. And even if it's when you're in bed and you have a record on and the Beatles are just singing to you and you only, and they have that power.
You just made me remember that I used to sit with these ginormous headphones on. I'd plug it into the stereo and just sit and listen to Beatles albums. When I was a teenager, I would just sit with my feet up, like, I don't know, the stereo was on this thing. Here's the mantle with all the Beatles albums. And I would just plug in my little, with this like squirrely cord and just like, and you're right. And especially like some of the more intimate songs, they do it. It gets right here, like they're like this one's going out for Amanda. Like you totally feel that. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, with the Beatles, I feel like they have something that no other bands have. What do you think about that?
I agree. There is something because it was more like they were. I just got done watching that long documentary, and I don't know. I feel like I think I've seen all the documentaries, but it's like people try to put into words that they were more than a band. They were an experience or a way of life. Or that sounds dumb when I say it out loud, but they were more than just a band singing songs. And by the way, I also love Bob Dylan. He was my very first concert when I was
Oh.
11 at the I know, and he's right behind. And so he was the other one I would listen to with my headphones on, and I just both of them. But I still love both of them. I still listen to Bob Dylan all the time. He just speaks to me. And so as the Beatles do.
What is it about them that makes it spiritual?
Well, you know what's interesting? In watching the latest documentary of how they would sit around and write their songs, this sort of magical relationship between all of them, obviously Paul McCartney and John Lennon, you know, uh, wrote a lot of them, but George Harrison and Ringo as well. They just had this symbiotic relationship. It just seemed magical, like their ability to, first of all, always be polite to one another. Even when right before they were breaking up, watching that documentary, you just saw that there was a deep caring for one another. And I think born of that is this magical storytelling aspect because they just seem to be in this same, I don't know, energy of I think it was just the way that they wrote their songs together and helped tell these stories. I mean, I don't know. I can't put it into words, actually. They just had a magical ability to express themselves and and help us express ourselves by listening to them, I think.
Wow. No, I love that answer. I completely agree with it. I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's just one of those
Yeah.
things where it's impossible to put it into words. You just have to feel it.
Well, they seem so connected to themselves and each other, and maybe that's why we can feel so connected to the music. Because it's almost like they're channeling it to some degree. It just feels bigger than human and deeper than I think a lot of people go. I mean,
Yeah,
just their poetry and yeah, and their sense of fun on their lighter songs too. Like it wasn't like everything was all heady and heavy. It was just true and authentic and from the heart. That's what it is. And so it goes straight from their heart to our heart. And I think as humans, we crave that. We crave that heart centered connection with others.
yeah. If it's made with love, then you definitely feel the love when it
Yeah.
comes through.
Yeah.
And you said you've seen the Get Back documentary.
Yes.
What did you think of that?
You know what? I really, really enjoyed it. And I mean, that was where I really saw how respectful they were to one another. Because even when they were annoyed or frustrated, they chose their words carefully and they were respectful with one another. And I thought that was amazing because, especially like at the end, they're breaking up and they were still able to be so civil. And there must have been such a deep love there. And also, they were literally the biggest thing that had ever happened in the world. And they are the only four that knew what that was like to be a part of that. And I think that that hold was, even when they had their fallings out later, I think that still kept them, you know, together ultimately, you know, in some way. The thing that I took away too was Yoko Ono seemed so like such an intruder. I don't, and they didn't seem to mind her there, so she probably wasn't. But she would sit. It was the thing was this constant thing of like she was just always rustling papers and just trying to distract from the camera and acting bored and like making these jerky movements and shuffling mail and getting up and sitting down. And I was like, why are you there? Like, why are you in inner circle? Like when they show Linda McCartney and she's sitting over on the side with her kid, just enjoying the music. But she would just go sit like right in their brain meld. And I was just like, that was just so weird, and how weird for the other Beatles. And yet they were so respectful about it. But it had to have been weird. I mean, she full on intruder. But then maybe not. I mean, I don't know. But that was one of my takeaways. I was like, if she shuffles one more piece of mail, okay, so she drove me nuts through the whole thing. I'm like, oh my God. So that's like my funny take on it. But I really just, I felt from there, you really saw like how close they were, even when they were breaking up, and how much they meant to each other. And that even if they were seeing that, you know, that it was the end of the road, they were still able to create some of their most beautiful songs at the very end. And then, oh my God, to be on that roof or being on the ground and see that last show, I mean, in the freezing cold, and it was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, I really, really, really loved it. And so those are my takes on it. And
Yeah.
watching their writing, their method of writing their songs. I mean, it was just not what I thought. Like they just really sat around and like it was a job in a way. Like, okay, we're from 9 to 5. We're gonna sit and noodle on the guitar and the piano, and I'm gonna throw a word out, and you're like, oh, what rhymes with Tucson, Arizona? That's a place. Like when they did that, I'm like, I was like, oh, JoJo, I just thought that was so funny. I'm like, oh, because it rhymed. Okay. I was always wondered why they sang about Tucson, Arizona.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's like, you know what I mean? When they
I
do
had
that,
that same thought. Yeah.
he's like, Tucson, Arizona. I'm like, that's why you picked that. So I love that though. I thought that was, I mean, great joy watching it. And it was, yes. What do you think of it?
I loved it. I've been craving that kind of footage for like my whole life.
Yeah. And you know what else I loved? Ringo just was so, like, you could tell like he was like in a way that, to me it seemed like the center they could all come off of, because he didn't have an issue with anyone. That was
Totally.
my takeaway. And that
Yeah.
he would just, and you could see it in his face sometimes, like, come on, you guys, get your crap together.
Yeah.
Come on. Like, we're all friends here. But did you feel that way? I just felt like he was the one person nobody had a thing with.
Yeah, absolutely. Ringo was like without Ringo, I don't know how they would have survived, because he was the one that no one had an issue with. And,
Yeah.
even when he brought up song ideas, he wasn't that pushy with them. I think he did
Yeah.
like taking a trip to Carolina, and they all just kind of laughed about it.
Yeah.
And he was laughing too. And he didn't get mad that they were laughing. But then he came into the studio with Octopus's Garden, and I thought that was another great scene. And he played it on the piano, and then George Harrison was helping him out with the chords and the shift from like the verse to the bridge.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a beautiful scene between George and Ringo too.
I did too. And that they all played like every instrument.
Yeah.
That not
Oh yeah.
enough has ever been mentioned about that. that they all played, you know, John's at the piano, Paul's at the piano, on the bass, the drums. Oh, I can play the guitar. I'm going to play they all played, they all just seemed so multi-talented.
Yeah, and they all switched on and off, and then they brought in Billy Preston on the piano, which added another dimension to them as
Yeah.
well. I
Yeah.
thought it was a great, great, great documentary, and I wish there was a fourth part, but then I wish there was also like a 3-part for each year and each album of the Beatles too.
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing if there was that much footage? And and the other thing too, they dressed so nicely to go sit in that room and write their music. Like where I'm just so used to, people today, everybody'd be in sweatpants or something, and
Right. Yeah.
in their tea, or I'm sure later in the afternoon it wasn't tea, but they just seemed so civilized, and yeah, I loved it too. I loved it
Yeah.
too, and it was great to see that, to have that like private access.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Amanda, what are you up to now? What kind of projects have you been involved in recently?
Well, since the pandemic, I started recording audiobooks, so that's been really fun. Just learning how to do that, and a lot of young adult books. And I've been working on this little indie series called The Resonator on Amazon. I play Professor McMichaels, who it's like a monsters. It's in the H.P. Lovecraft universe. So
Mhm.
it takes place at Miskatonic U, and it's about these young, gorgeous college students, and they're all amazingly talented. And it's written and directed by William Butler, and so it's very fun. So I play like a professor, but nobody on the show is who you think they are, because everybody's kind of a monster, and it's a science fiction and
Right.
scary. I don't know. I guess science fiction, monstery. I guess it could be horror, but it's not really horror, because it's more just monsters and science fiction. And then right now I'm filming an episode of The Rookie for ABC, which has been really, really fun, with a great cast. And I do, guest stars pretty often, and it's sadly not the norm to walk on a set that is so beautiful. Like, everybody there is so nice and so joyous and happy to be there. And really, I love the Nathan Fillion is like literally too good. He's like an angel. And our director, Bill Rowe, is amazing. Like, every aspect of this has been amazing. I have a few more days, and I'm very excited. And then next up, I have a deadline to finish a book that I'm supposed to be recording, but I've been filming, so I haven't done it. And then I'm doing a movie. It's like a country western movie about this country western singer, and I play his ex-wife, and it's a really good. I'm really super excited about this movie, and so I have that, and then I'm open. I'd love to be back on a TV series. I just want to go to work every day on a TV series and tell a great story that everybody wants to tune into. And, either it's one that drops once a week or one you can binge. I don't even care. I want to go back on a TV series and have my little TV series family. That's my plan. So maybe the Beatles can make it happen for me.
Well, you heard her, everybody. If you have a TV show out there, let us know. No, but I think that'd be great. Within the next couple years, I'm sure you're going to get that easily.
Oh, thank you, man. You're so cool.
Well, it's cool that Amanda Wyss thinks that I'm cool.
But you are. Your voice is so soothing. Oh my
Oh,
gosh. I love
thank
it.
you.
I'm just sitting here going, okay, I need to slow down. I need to get in your groove, man.
So, Amanda, in the next 5, 15, 50, 200 years, where are the Beatles going to be?
Do you mean like in the zeitgeist of the world and people? Or
Yes.
I think everything that was old becomes new again. And I think they're going to have a huge resurgence. Do you know what I mean? I mean, obviously people know who they are, but I think
Right.
that they're going to have the world needs that heart and that kind of storytelling right now. And I feel like they're going to come back big, like in the sense of they're going to be rediscovered by the younger generation, and they'll make the Beatles their own, but in doing so will bring it back to the forefront for all to enjoy. That's what I think will happen.
I would hope so. I would love to see that because in a sense, the Beatles have been every generation's kind of taken on a different kind of ownership of the Beatles, and yeah, I'm happy to say that I've kind of taken on my ownership of the Beatles instead of thinking that they're my parents' band. They're kind of my band
Yeah.
in a way when I think of it, and
You know what? They are your band, though. And I think that's what's so amazing about their music because it's timeless. Their poetry is about the human experience, and that's timeless and ageless, and it stays radiant and it doesn't lose its magic. It's not era specific music, it's human music.
I completely agree. And there's nothing dated about their sound either. They
No.
sound contemporary. Their lyrics are contemporary, and their message is always contemporary and always will be contemporary, which is love.
Yeah, you're right. Well said.
Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was truly an honor to be able to speak with you about the Beatles, and I
Oh,
love the shirt, by the way. For
thank
those of you who
you.
can't see, she's wearing an All You Need Is Love shirt, which is just great. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
I just want to say thank you for having me. I was just thrilled when you reached out to me, and this has been really special and fun for me too, and meaningful. And you're just lovely, and
Oh,
I'm
thank
happy
you.
I've had this chance to chat with you. And you're so knowledgeable, and we'll stay in touch.